I was slapped 25 times in front of my daughter's husband, and he didn't do a single thing to stop her. He just sat there on that leather couch, sipping his whiskey, watching me like I was some kind of Sunday afternoon show put on for his entertainment. My name is Seraphine Dolroy, and that Sunday destroyed me in ways I'm still trying to piece together. Not the physical pain, though my face stung for days, but the look in my daughter's eyes. That cold, calculating stare that said I didn't matter anymore. That said I was disposable. That said I was nothing but a burden she'd been carrying too long. I didn't scream, didn't beg, didn't fight back. I just stood there, absorbing every strike, every insult, every ounce of hatred she'd apparently been storing up inside her. And when she was done, when her hand finally dropped to her side and her chest was heaving from the effort, I did the only thing I could think to do. I gathered my purse, walked out that front door, and left. But here's what my daughter didn't know. Here's what she couldn't possibly have known as she stood there catching her breath, probably feeling proud of herself for finally putting her annoying mother in her place. That house she was standing in? The one she claimed as hers? The one she and her husband had been bragging about owning for the past 3 years? It was mine. Every brick. Every window. Every single square foot. And I had the papers to prove it. What would you do if your own child turned on you like that? If the person you raised, sacrificed for, loved with everything you had, looked at you like you were trash? Drop a comment below because what happened next changed everything. Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family, enjoy the story. The drive to my new apartment that evening felt like moving through water. Everything was slow, heavy, wrong. I'd rented a tiny one-bedroom place on the edge of town 2 weeks earlier, right after the fights started getting worse. Right after my daughter's husband started making comments about how I was overstaying my welcome in what he called their home. I should have seen it coming. The way they'd started talking over me at dinner. The way they'd stopped including me in family photos. The way my grandson had started calling me Grandma Seraphine instead of just Grandma, like I was some distant relative they saw once a year at Christmas. But you don't want to believe your own daughter is trying to erase you. You don't want to face that truth. The apartment was cold when I walked in. I'd barely furnished it. Just a bed, a small table, 2 chairs, and an old wicker seat by the window that creaked every time I sat down. The refrigerator hummed constantly, this low, vibrating sound that became the only voice in the room most nights. I made tea that evening even though I didn't want it. Just needed something to do with my hands. Something normal. Something that made me feel human instead of like whatever broken thing my daughter had turned me into. The bruises on my arms were already darkening. 5 on my left arm where she'd grabbed me. 3 on my right. The ones on my face would take longer to show, I knew. They always did. I sat down at that small table and just stared at the wall for what felt like hours. Replaying it all. Every word. Every slap. Every second her husband sat there doing nothing. The neighbors had heard. I know they did because Mrs. Patterson next door had peeked through her curtains. But nobody came. Nobody helped. That's when something broke inside me. Not in a loud way. Not in a screaming, crying, falling apart way. It broke quietly, like ice cracking on a frozen lake. You hear it, you feel it, but you don't see the damage until later when you're already sinking. I couldn't just accept this. Couldn't just fade into the background and disappear like they clearly wanted me to. Couldn't let my daughter rewrite history and pretend I was never important, never sacrificed, never mattered. So I did what I always did when life got overwhelming. I started organizing. There was this old cardboard box I'd brought with me from the house. One of the few things I'd managed to grab before they'd made it clear I wasn't welcome anymore. It was full of papers I'd been meaning to sort through for years. Bank statements, receipts, insurance documents, Random notes scribbled on napkins from decades ago. I pulled it out from under my bed, set it on the table, and started going through it piece by piece. Most of it was junk. Expired warranties. Old utility bills. Pay stubs from jobs I'd quit 20 years ago. But then, about halfway down, beneath a stack of yellowed envelopes bound together with a fraying string, I found it. A property deed. Thick paper, official stamps, legal language I could barely understand. But one thing was crystal clear even in the dim light of my tiny apartment. The name on that deed wasn't my daughter's. It wasn't her husband's. It was mine. My hands started shaking as I pulled it out, as I read it again and again to make sure I wasn't imagining things. Seraphine Marie Dolroy, owner of 428 Oakwood Drive. Purchase date, April 17, 2009. Signed, notarized, filed with the county. All of it. Mine. The memory came flooding back so fast it almost knocked the wind out of me. I'd been working 2 jobs back then, one at the diner, one cleaning offices at night. Saved every penny for 3 years straight. Ate nothing but rice and beans most weeks. Wore the same coat through 2 winters because I couldn't afford a new one. I bought that house for my daughter's future. For her stability. For her dreams. She was 19, just finishing community college, talking about getting married someday and needing a place to start a family. So I gave her that gift. Let her move in after the wedding. Told her to make it a home. But I never transferred the deed. Never signed anything over. It just never came up, and honestly, I didn't think it mattered. She was my daughter. Of course she could live there. Of course it was hers to use. Except now, as I sat there staring at that piece of paper, I realized something that made my stomach twist into knots. They'd been telling everyone it was theirs. Claiming ownership. Acting like I was some guest who'd overstayed. Treating me like an intruder in my own house. And I'd let them. I'd believed their version of the story because I trusted my own daughter. I stayed awake until the sun came up, reading every word on that deed, checking every signature, making sure I wasn't losing my mind. And somewhere in those quiet hours, as the first light started creeping through my window, something shifted inside me. The pain was still there. The betrayal still cut deep. But underneath it all, a new feeling started taking root. Clarity. I wasn't erased yet. Not completely. They'd tried to write me out of the story, but they'd forgotten something important. I still held the pen. What I discovered later that night would turn the whole story upside down. The apartment felt smaller every day. Like the walls were slowly closing in, inch by inch, squeezing out whatever was left of the person I used to be. That refrigerator hum became my constant companion. A low, steady reminder that I was alone now in ways I'd never been alone before. I'd wake up at 3 in the morning and just sit in that wicker chair by the window, staring out at nothing. The highway ran about a mile away, and I could hear the trucks passing in the distance. Sometimes I'd count them. 14 trucks between 3 and 4 in the morning. 9 between 4 and 5. It was something to focus on, besides the memories that wouldn't stop playing in my head. My daughter's face. That look of triumph when she'd finally put me in my place. Like she'd been waiting years for permission to do it, and her husband had finally given her that permission just by sitting there and watching. The thing about betrayal is it doesn't hit you all at once. It's not like physical pain where you know immediately how bad you're hurt. Betrayal seeps in slow. It finds all the cracks in your foundation and fills them with poison until one day you wake up and realize you can't remember what it felt like to trust anyone. I stopped answering my phone. Stopped checking my messages. A few people from church reached out at first, asking where I'd been, if I was okay. But I couldn't explain it. Couldn't put into words how your own child can look at you like you're garbage and mean it. So I just stopped responding. Let them think whatever they wanted to think. The bruises faded after about 2 weeks. The ones on my arms went from deep purple to yellow-green to nothing. The ones on my face took longer, but eventually they disappeared too. But the invisible marks, those stayed. Those dug in deeper every single day. I'd catch myself in the mirror sometimes and not recognize the woman staring back. When did I get so small? When did my shoulders start curving inward like I was trying to take up less space in the world? That's what they'd done to me. Made me feel like I didn't deserve to exist. Like my presence was an inconvenience. Like everything I'd sacrificed, everything I'd given, everything I'd built. None of it mattered because they'd decided it didn't. But then I'd remember that deed. That piece of paper sitting on my table in a manila folder I'd labeled important. And something would spark inside me. Just a tiny flame, barely enough to see by, but it was there. I started going through that box of papers more carefully. Really looking at what I had. Not just the deed, but everything else too. Bank statements showing the mortgage payments I'd made for years. Receipts for repairs I'd paid for. Insurance policies with my name as the primary holder. 3 nights after I'd found the deed, I pulled out an old envelope stuffed with photographs. Pictures from when I'd first bought the house. Me standing on the front porch with the realtor, holding those big ceremonial keys they give you. Me painting the kitchen that awful yellow color my daughter had begged for. Me planting roses in the front yard because she'd said they were her favorite. In every single photo, the house was mine. The joy on my face was real. The pride was real. The love was real. They'd taken all those photos down years ago. Replaced them with pictures of just the 2 of them. Erased me from the walls like I'd never existed. Like I'd never mattered. Like the house had always been theirs and I was just some story they told about a difficult mother-in-law who wouldn't leave. I set the photos down and pressed my palms against my eyes until I saw stars. The anger was building now. Not the hot, explosive kind that makes you do stupid things. The cold, calculating kind that sits in your chest and waits. They thought they'd won. Thought they'd finally gotten rid of the burden. Thought they could just rewrite history and I'd fade into the background like a bad memory nobody wants to talk about. But they'd made one critical mistake. They'd forgotten that I was the one who'd built that life in the first place. That I was the one who'd signed the papers, made the sacrifices, laid the foundation. They'd gotten so caught up in their own version of events that they'd stopped checking the facts. And facts, I was learning, were about to become my best weapon. I couldn't do this alone though. I knew that much. Paper trails are only powerful when someone knows how to read them, how to use them, how to turn them into something that matters in the real world. That's when I thought of Maribel. Maribel Cortez. We'd met at church about 5 years back, bonded over coffee after service one Sunday. She was a paralegal, sharp, no nonsense, the kind of woman who could spot a lie from 3 rooms away. She'd helped me navigate some pension paperwork when my late husband's benefits got tangled up in red tape. If anyone could help me make sense of what I had, it was her. I picked up my phone for the first time in weeks and sent her a text. Simple. Direct. Maribel, I need help. Are you free to meet? Her response came back in less than 5 minutes. Tomorrow. Coffee shop on 5th. 10 a.m. I set my phone down and looked back at that folder on the table. At the deed with my name on it. At the photos of a house that was legally, officially, undeniably mine. That night, I slept better than I had in months. Because for the first time since those 25 slaps, I wasn't just surviving. I realized that house was never theirs to begin with. It was mine all along. The memory hit me hard the next morning while I was getting dressed for my meeting with Maribel. I was standing in front of my tiny closet, trying to decide what to wear, when suddenly I was back in 2009. Back to being that exhausted woman working 2 jobs and dreaming of something better. I'd been 38 years old. Single mom. My husband had passed 3 years earlier from a heart attack nobody saw coming, and I was still trying to figure out how to breathe without him. My daughter was 19, full of dreams about college and marriage and building a life. And I wanted to give her that. Wanted to give her the stability I never had growing up. So I worked. God, did I work. 6 in the morning until 2 in the afternoon at Ruby's Diner, slinging eggs and coffee to truckers and construction workers. Then home for a quick shower before heading to the office building downtown, where I'd clean from 6 p.m. until midnight. Toilets, break rooms, conference tables. Didn't matter. It was money. I saved every dollar I could squeeze out of those paychecks. Skipped meals. Wore shoes until they literally fell apart. Kept the heat so low in winter that I could see my breath in the mornings. My daughter thought I was being crazy, told me to spend a little on myself, but she didn't understand. I was building something. Something that would last. It took 3 years to save enough for the down payment. 3 years of my life reduced to a number in a bank account. But when I finally walked into that real estate office and signed those papers, when I got the keys to 428 Oakwood Drive, I cried right there in front of the realtor. That house wasn't just property. It was proof that sacrifice meant something. That hard work paid off. That I could give my daughter something real, something solid, something nobody could take away. Except they had taken it away. Not legally. I knew that now. But in every other way that mattered. They'd taken my sacrifice and rewritten it as their success story. Taken my years of work and called it their achievement. Taken my gift and turned it into their birthright. The anger that rose up in me that morning wasn't the sad, defeated kind I'd been carrying around. This was sharp. Focused. Clear. I put on my best shirt, the navy blue one I saved for important occasions, and headed to 5th Street. The coffee shop was nearly empty when I arrived. Maribel was already there, sitting in a corner booth with her laptop open and a notepad beside her. She looked up when I walked in, and her face changed immediately. She knew something was wrong. "Seraphine," she said, standing up to hug me. "What happened to you?" I hadn't realized how much the past few weeks had changed me until I saw my reflection in her eyes. The weight loss. The exhaustion. The way I carried myself like I was afraid of taking up too much space. "It's a long story," I said, sliding into the booth across from her. "Then start from the beginning." So I did. Told her everything. The fights. The escalating disrespect. That Sunday afternoon when my daughter had slapped me 25 times while her husband watched. The way they'd been claiming the house as theirs. The way they'd erased me from the story. Maribel's jaw tightened as I talked. Her hands clenched around her coffee cup. When I finally finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "Do you have proof?" she asked. "Of ownership?" I pulled the folder from my bag and slid it across the table. Watched her open it. Watched her eyes scan the deed, the bank statements, the receipts. She read in silence for what felt like forever, her pen tapping against her notebook in this steady rhythm that somehow made me feel less alone. Finally, she looked up at me, and there was something fierce in her expression. "Seraphine, do you realize what you have here? This house is in your name. You have every right to it. What they've been doing, claiming ownership, threatening you, putting hands on you, this isn't just disrespect. This is erasure." That word hit me like a punch to the chest. Erasure. Yes. That's exactly what it was. They hadn't just been rude or ungrateful. They'd been systematically trying to erase me from my own life. "I have someone you need to meet," Maribel said, already pulling out her phone. "Quinton Alva. He's an attorney who specializes in property disputes and elder protection. If anyone can help you navigate this, it's him." She made the call right there, spoke in rapid Spanish for a few minutes, then hung up and looked at me with something like hope in her eyes. He can see you tomorrow. 2 p.m. His office downtown. I nodded, feeling something shift inside me. This was real now. This wasn't just me sitting alone in my apartment staring at old papers. This was the beginning of something bigger. Thank you, I whispered. Maribel reached across the table and squeezed my hand. You're not erased, Seraphine. Not yet. Not ever. We're going to fix this. I left that coffee shop feeling lighter than I had in months. The anger was still there, burning steady in my chest, but now it had direction. Now it had purpose. I spent the rest of that day and all of the next morning preparing. Going through every document in that box with fresh eyes. Organizing everything into neat piles. Making notes about dates and payments and conversations I could remember. By the time I walked into Quinton Alvar's office the next afternoon, I had a timeline. A story. Evidence. Not just feelings and hurt, but facts. Cold, hard, undeniable facts. Mr. Alvar was younger than I expected, maybe in his early 40s, with kind eyes and a firm handshake. He listened to my story without interrupting, taking notes in neat handwriting that somehow made me trust him more. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and looked at me directly. Mrs. Dolroy, I'm going to be straight with you. What your daughter and her husband have done is serious. Claiming ownership of property that isn't theirs, intimidating the actual owner, potentially committing fraud. This goes way beyond a family dispute. Can we fix it? I asked. We can do better than fix it, he said, a small smile playing at the corner of his mouth. We can make sure this never happens to you again. That night, I realized the war wasn't just about a house, it was about my existence. The investigation started small. Quiet. Almost invisible. That's what Mr. Alvar told me on day one. We build the case brick by brick. No rushing. No mistakes. Maribel came to my apartment that first week with her laptop and a portable scanner. We set up shop at my tiny kitchen table, and she taught me things I never knew existed. Metadata. Digital timestamps. Document authentication. Words that sounded like a foreign language but slowly started making sense. Every time someone scans a document or takes a photo of it, the file stores information, she explained, pointing at lines of code on her screen. Date, time, device used. It's like a fingerprint. We started with the copies of documents my daughter had supposedly used to prove ownership. She'd shown them to the bank 2 years ago when they'd refinanced. Shown them to insurance companies. Even shown them to neighbors when questions came up about who actually owned the property. But here's the thing about lies. They leave traces. Maribel pulled up a scanned deed my daughter had filed with the bank. It looked official at first glance. My daughter's name where mine should be. A signature at the bottom that was supposed to be mine. Even a notary stamp. Look at this, Maribel said, zooming in on the date stamp. This document was supposedly signed and notarized in April 2009. But according to the metadata, this file was created in November 2021. Someone scanned or created this document 12 years after it was supposedly signed. My hands started shaking. They forged it. Looks that way. And there's more. She pulled up another document. Then another. Each one had the same problem. Dates that didn't match. Signatures that looked similar to mine but weren't quite right. The loop on my S was too big, the tail on my Y too short. Details I might not have noticed, but a handwriting expert definitely would. They got sloppy, Maribel said. Probably thought nobody would ever check. Probably thought you'd just accept their version of events and fade away. That word again. Fade. Disappear. Cease to exist. But I wasn't fading. Not anymore. Over the next few weeks, we dug deeper. Mr. Alver hired a private investigator, a quiet woman named Chun who looked like she could disappear into a crowd without trying. She started talking to neighbors. People who'd lived on Oakwood Drive for years. People who remembered when I first bought the house. The stories they told painted a picture I hadn't wanted to see. Mrs. Patterson from next door remembered my daughter telling her 5 years ago that Mom signed the house over when she moved out. Mr. Jenkins 3 houses down recalled my son-in-law bragging at a block party about finally owning property outright, no mortgage, no strings attached. They'd been building their lie for years. Telling it so often they'd probably started believing it themselves. Then Chun found the emails. I'll never forget the day Maribel called me, her voice tight with barely controlled anger. Seraphine, you need to come to Quinton's office. Right now. I drove there with my heart pounding, convinced something had gone wrong. Maybe the case was falling apart. Maybe my daughter had found out what we were doing and had destroyed evidence. But when I walked into that conference room and saw their faces, Maribel, Mr. Alver and Chun, I knew it was the opposite. Sit down, Mr. Alver said gently. Chun slid a folder across the table. We subpoenaed your daughter's email records. What we found. Mrs. Dolroy, I'm sorry you have to see this. I opened the folder with trembling hands. The first email was from my daughter to her husband, dated 3 years ago. Subject line, the mom problem. I read the words slowly, feeling each one like a knife sliding between my ribs. We need to figure out how to get rid of her permanently. She's ruining our lives, always questioning our decisions, always acting like this is still her house. Maybe we can convince her the deed got transferred years ago? She's getting older, might not remember. Another email, 6 months later, from her husband to my daughter, found a guy who can make documents look official. Cost us $500, but worth it if it finally gets her out. Once we show the bank we own it, she won't have a leg to stand on. There were dozens more. Plans. Schemes. Conversations about cleaning the title and making sure Mom can't cause problems. Talk about my age, my memory, my deteriorating mental state. All lies they'd planned to use against me if I ever fought back. One email from my daughter made me physically sick. Sometimes I fantasize about what life would be like if she just wasn't around anymore. Not that I'd ever do anything, but God, wouldn't it be peaceful? I closed the folder and just sat there, unable to speak. Unable to process that my own daughter, the child I'd carried, raised, sacrificed everything for, had written those words. There's more, Mr. Alver said quietly. Communications with a document forger. Receipts for fake notary services. Even a draft transfer agreement with your signature forged on it that they never filed because they got nervous about getting caught. Maribel reached over and took my hand. Seraphine, you've been erased. But you can take your story back. I looked up at her, at all of them, these people who barely knew me but were fighting harder for my dignity than my own daughter ever had. What do we do now? I asked. Mr. Alver smiled. Not a happy smile. A warrior's smile. Now we start fighting back. Quietly. Carefully. But effectively. He pulled out a stack of papers. First move, we file for a property hold. It's a legal freeze that prevents any sale, transfer, or refinancing of the property until ownership is clarified. From the outside, it looks like routine paperwork. But inside that house, your daughter and her husband are going to panic. They'll know it's me, I said. They'll suspect, he agreed. But they won't know what you have. Won't know about the emails we found. Won't know how deep our investigation has gone. And that uncertainty? That's going to make them sloppy. Make them desperate. I thought about it for a long moment. About those 25 slaps. About the emails. About years of erasure and lies and systematic destruction of everything I'd built. Do it, I said. The paperwork was filed that afternoon. A simple legal hold, buried in courthouse records where most people would never think to look. But Mr. Alva assured me that within 48 hours, any attempt to access or modify the property would trigger immediate alerts. I went home that night and sat in my wicker chair, looking out at the distant highway. Somewhere across town, in the house I'd bought with 3 years of my life, my daughter and her husband had no idea what was coming. They'd tried to erase me, tried to write me out of the story, tried to make me disappear. But erasure, I was learning, only works if you let it. That night, I realized the war wasn't just about a house, it was about my existence. The first call came at 11:30 on a Thursday night, 3 days after the property hold was filed. My phone lit up with my daughter's name, and I stared at it for 5 rings before deciding to answer. Mom. Her voice was different. Higher pitched. Almost sweet. The voice she used to use when she was little and wanted something. Hey, sorry to call so late. How are you? I didn't respond right away. Let the silence stretch. Mom? You there? I'm here, I said flatly. Good. Listen, something weird happened. We tried to refinance the house, get a better interest rate, and the bank said there's some kind of hold on the property? Like legal paperwork or something. Do you know anything about that? My heart was racing, but I kept my voice steady. Calm. Why would I know anything about that? Well, the house is in your name technically, right? Even though we've been living here and paying for everything. We just figured maybe you forgot to sign some transfer papers or something got mixed up at the county office. The lies came so easily to her. So smoothly. Like she'd practiced this conversation in her head 100 times. The house is in my name because I own it, I said quietly. I bought it. I paid for it. I never signed anything over to you. The silence on the other end was deafening. Mom, that's not how we remember it. You told us we could have it. You said it was ours. I said you could live there. I never said I was giving you ownership. But we've been making the payments. We've been maintaining it. We've put thousands of dollars into renovations. What payments? I asked. I paid off that mortgage 6 years ago. There are no payments. And as for renovations, I'd love to see receipts. I could hear her breathing getting faster. Could picture her face turning red the way it did when she was cornered. What did you do? She asked, and now the sweetness was gone. Now it was pure anger. What the hell did you do, Mom? I simply protected what's mine. She hung up without another word. I set my phone down and realized my hands were shaking. But not from fear. From something else. Something that felt almost like power. The calls kept coming over the next few days. Sometimes from my daughter. Sometimes from her husband. Sometimes from numbers I didn't recognize. Probably friends or family they dragged into it. I stopped answering most of them. But the voicemails told the story. My daughter's first message, Mom, please call me back. We need to talk about this like adults. Second message, I don't understand why you're doing this. We've given you everything. We let you live with us, took care of you, and this is how you repay us. The rewriting of history was stunning. They'd let me live with them in my own house. They'd taken care of me, while systematically erasing my existence. They'd given me everything, while stealing what I'd built with my own hands. Her husband's messages were uglier. More threatening. This is going to end badly for you. You're going to regret messing with us. I saved every single one. Meanwhile, Maribel and Mr. Alva kept digging. Chen kept interviewing neighbors. And the evidence kept piling up higher and higher. One afternoon, Maribel showed me something that made my blood run cold. A group text chain between my daughter, her husband, and someone named Derek who apparently helped them forge the documents. My daughter, she's fighting back. The old lady actually grew a spine. Her husband, doesn't matter. She can't prove anything. It's her word against ours. Derek, you guys still owe me $300 for those papers, by the way. My daughter, after this blows over. Can't have money transfers on record right now. They thought they were so smart. So careful. But every text, every email, every digital footprint was another nail in their coffin. Mr. Alva called me in for a meeting 6 weeks after we'd started the investigation. His office was full of file boxes now, all evidence related to my case. He looked tired but satisfied. We have everything we need, he said, spreading documents across his conference table. Forged signatures. Financial records proving you paid for everything. Emails showing premeditation and fraud. Witness testimony from neighbors. Even security camera footage from the house across the street showing you doing yard work there for years, establishing your presence and care for the property. What happens now? I asked. Now we file for a court hearing. We present all of this to a judge. And we let the law do what it's designed to do, protect people like you from people like them. I looked at all those documents. All that evidence of betrayal and lies and calculated cruelty. Part of me felt sick. This was my daughter. My child. How had we gotten here? But another part of me, the part that had been slapped 25 times, that had been erased and dismissed and told I didn't matter, that part felt something else entirely. Relief. Because for the first time in years, someone was listening. Someone was taking me seriously. Someone believed me. When? I asked. Court dates set for 6 weeks from now. October 15th. Between now and then, they're going to try everything to get you to drop this. They'll apologize, threaten, beg, manipulate. You need to stay strong. I will. And I meant it. That night, I organized my own copies of everything into neat folders. Labeled them carefully. Arranged them chronologically. It was therapeutic in a way, taking chaos and turning it into order. Taking erasure and turning it into evidence. Taking silence and turning it into a voice that couldn't be ignored. I thought about that Sunday afternoon again. Those 25 slaps. The look on my daughter's face. Her husband's smirk. They'd thought they'd broken me. Thought they'd finally put me in my place. But they'd forgotten something important. I was the woman who'd worked 2 jobs for 3 years to buy a house. Who'd raised a child alone after losing her husband. Who'd survived poverty, grief, exhaustion, and heartbreak. I was stronger than they ever gave me credit for. Every crumb of evidence led to one undeniable truth. They had tried to erase me completely. The property hold hit them harder than I expected. Within a week, my daughter showed up at my apartment unannounced. I heard the knock and looked through the peephole to see her standing there, arms crossed, that familiar expression on her face, the one she wore when she was about to demand something. I almost didn't open the door. Almost let her stand there until she gave up and left. But curiosity got the better of me. I wanted to see what she'd try next. Mom. She pushed past me the second I cracked the door open. Walked right into my tiny living room like she owned it. Like she owned everything. We need to talk. I'm listening, I said, staying by the door. Keeping my escape route clear. This thing you're doing, this legal whatever, it needs to stop. You're embarrassing us. The neighbors are asking questions. The bank is asking questions. It's making us look bad. Not it's wrong. Not we're sorry. Just it's making us look bad. Making you look bad? I repeated slowly. That's what concerns you. Mom, come on. Don't be dramatic. This is just a misunderstanding. We can fix this. We can go to the courthouse together, clear everything up, sign whatever papers need signing. Make it official that the house is ours like it should have been years ago. The audacity was breathtaking. She was standing in my apartment, the apartment I'd been forced to move into after she'd assaulted me, asking me to just hand over the house I'd bought with 3 years of my life. No, I said simply. Her expression changed. The fake sweetness dropped like a mask. What do you mean no? I mean no. The house is mine. I'm not signing anything. I'm not clearing up any misunderstanding. There is no misunderstanding. You're being selfish. Her voice was rising now. You're being a bitter old woman who can't stand to see her daughter happy. That's what this is really about, isn't it? You can't handle that we don't need you anymore. I felt that familiar sting behind my eyes. That old instinct to apologize, to back down, to make peace at any cost. But then I remembered the emails. The ones where she talked about getting rid of me. About how peaceful life would be if I just wasn't around. I think you should leave, I said quietly. Are you serious right now? I'm your daughter. And you slapped me 25 times while your husband watched and did nothing. You tried to steal my house. You forged documents with my signature. You spent years telling people I was crazy, that I was a burden, that I needed to be dealt with. So yes, I'm serious. Leave. She stared at me like she'd never seen me before. Like I was some stranger wearing her mother's face. You're going to regret this, she said, heading for the door. You're going to end up alone with nothing, and it'll be your own fault. I already have nothing, I said. You made sure of that. Now I'm just protecting what's left. She slammed the door so hard the walls shook. I stood there for a long time after she left, my heart pounding, my hands trembling. Part of me wanted to cry. Part of me wanted to chase after her and fix things somehow. But the stronger part, the part that had been growing since I found that deed, knew I'd done the right thing. Mr. Alva called me that evening. I heard your daughter paid you a visit. How did you? She went straight to her lawyer afterward. Filed a motion to dismiss the property hold. Claims you're acting out of spite after a family disagreement. Claims she's been the de facto owner for years and you're just trying to cause trouble. My stomach dropped. Can she do that? She can try. But Seraphine, we have something she doesn't have. We have the truth. And more importantly, we have evidence. Her lawyer doesn't know what we know yet. Doesn't know about the emails or the forged documents or any of it. So what happens now? Now we wait for the court date. Let them think they might win. Let them get comfortable. And then we show the judge everything. The next few weeks were torture. Every day felt like a year. I'd wake up wondering if today was the day they'd find some loophole, some way to make all of this disappear. I'd check my phone obsessively, half expecting a message saying the case had been thrown out. But Mr. Alva kept reassuring me. Trust the process. Trust the evidence. My daughter tried a different approach 2 weeks before the court date. She sent her husband this time. He showed up at my apartment with flowers and an envelope. Mrs. Dolroy, he said, all fake politeness. I think we got off on the wrong foot. This whole situation has been blown way out of proportion. I didn't invite him in. Just stood in the doorway, staring at him. We want to make this right, he continued. So we talked to our financial advisor, and we'd like to offer you a settlement. $20,000. Cash. in exchange for transferring the deed to us and dropping all this legal stuff. $20,000. For a house worth at least $400,000. For property I'd sacrificed years of my life to buy. For my dignity, my safety, my very existence. No, I said. Be reasonable. $20,000 is a lot of money. You could. No. The house isn't for sale. Not to you. Not for any amount. His face hardened. The politeness vanished. You're making a mistake. We have rights too. We've been living there for years. We've put work into it. A judge is going to see that. Then I guess we'll see what the judge says. He dropped the flowers on my doorstep and left. The envelope stayed there until the next morning when I threw it away without opening it. 3 days before the court date, my daughter left a voicemail that I listened to exactly once. Mom, I don't know why you're doing this. I don't know what we did that was so terrible you try to destroy our lives. But fine. Have your day in court. Drag our family through this. Make us look like criminals. But when this is over, when the judge rules in our favor because we've been the ones taking care of that house for years, don't come crying to us. Don't expect us to forgive you. You'll have burned this bridge permanently. I saved the voicemail. Added it to the evidence folder. Every word she spoke just proved what Mr. Alva had been saying all along. They thought they were untouchable. Thought their version of events was the only one that mattered. The night before the court date, I couldn't sleep. I laid in bed staring at the ceiling, running through everything in my head. What if the judge didn't believe me? What if they found some technicality that made all our evidence worthless? What if I walked into that courtroom and walked out with nothing? But then I thought about those 25 slaps. About the emails planning my erasure. About years of being treated like I didn't matter. And I realized something important. Even if I lost in court, I'd already won something bigger. I'd found my voice again. I'd stopped accepting their version of reality. I'd stood up and said no more. That had to count for something. I got dressed the next morning in my best outfit, a simple gray suit I'd bought years ago for job interviews. Maribel picked me up at 9. Mr. Alva was meeting us at the courthouse. You ready? Maribel asked as we drove. I don't know, I admitted. But I'm here. That's all that matters. The courthouse was bigger than I expected. All marble and echoing hallways and people in suits rushing past with briefcases. Mr. Alva met us at the entrance, looking calm and confident. Their lawyer just arrived, he said. Young guy. Overconfident. This should be interesting. We walked into the courtroom together. My daughter and her husband were already seated on the other side with their attorney. She looked at me once, just once, and I saw something in her eyes I couldn't quite read. Fear? Anger? Regret? Maybe all three. The judge entered, and everyone stood. An older woman with gray hair and sharp eyes that seemed to see right through people. Please be seated, she said. Let's begin. And then the gavel finally fell. The room went completely silent. The judge looked down at the paperwork in front of her, then up at both sides. This is a property dispute regarding 428 Oakwood Drive. Mrs. Seraphine Dolroy claims ownership based on original purchase and deed. Mr. and Mrs. Harrison claim, she paused, reading more carefully, claim ownership based on years of residence and maintenance. Is that correct? My daughter's lawyer stood up. Young, slick-looking, expensive suit. Yes, Your Honor. My clients have been the primary residents and caretakers of the property for over 7 years. They've made significant financial investments in renovations and upkeep. While Mrs. Dolroy's name may technically appear on older documents, the practical reality is that my clients are the true owners in every meaningful sense. The way he said it made it sound so reasonable, so logical. Like I was just some bitter old woman clinging to paperwork while they'd done all the real work. Mr. Alva stood slowly. Didn't rush. Didn't seem bothered at all. Your Honor, if I may. The plaintiff would like to present evidence that tells a very different story. Proceed. What happened next felt like watching dominoes fall. One piece of evidence after another, each one knocking down another part of my daughter's lies. Mr. Alva started with the original deed. Walked the judge through the purchase date, the signatures, the financing. Showed bank records proving I'd paid every mortgage payment until the house was paid off completely 6 years ago. Your Honor, Mrs. Dolroy worked 2 jobs for 3 years to save for the down payment on this house. She purchased it as a gift for her daughter's future. She allowed her daughter to live there after marriage. But she never, not once, transferred legal ownership. My daughter's lawyer objected. Verbal agreements, Your Honor. My clients were promised the house. They've been operating under the good faith belief that it was theirs. Do you have documentation of these verbal agreements? The judge asked. Well, no, but... Then let's continue with what we do have documented. Mr. Alva pulled out the forged documents next. Placed them side by side with the originals. Even I could see the differences now, the signatures that didn't quite match, the dates that made no sense, the metadata showing they'd been created years after they were supposedly signed. These documents were presented to banks and insurance companies as proof of ownership, Mr. Alva said. But as you can see, they're forgeries. Poor ones. My daughter's face had gone pale. Her husband was whispering frantically to their lawyer, who was shuffling through papers like he might find something that could save them. Then came the emails. Mr. Alva projected them on a screen for the whole courtroom to see. Every word. Every calculated plan. Every discussion about getting rid of Mom and cleaning the title. I watched my daughter read her own words displayed for everyone to see. Watched her realize that her private conversations weren't private anymore. Watched her understand that the truth was finally, undeniably, completely out in the open. Your Honor, Mr. Alva said quietly, this wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a family disagreement about who promised what to whom. This was a calculated attempt to defraud an elderly woman out of property she legally owned. To gaslight her into believing she had no rights. To erase her from her own life. The judge was reading the emails now, her expression growing darker with each one. Mrs. Harrison, she said, looking directly at my daughter. Did you write these emails? My daughter stood up slowly. Your Honor, those were taken out of context. I was frustrated. My mother and I were fighting a lot and... Did you hire someone to forge documents with your mother's signature? Silence. Mrs. Harrison, I asked you a question. It wasn't. We just needed. She wasn't being reasonable and... Yes or no? More silence. Then, so quietly I almost couldn't hear it, yes. The word hung in the air like smoke. The judge sat back in her chair, and I could see her making calculations behind those sharp eyes. Weighing evidence. Considering consequences. Deciding what justice looked like in this particular moment. I've seen enough, she said finally. The deed to 428 Oakwood Drive is clear and undisputed. It lists Mrs. Seraphine Dolroy as the sole owner. The documents presented by Mr. and Mrs. Harrison have been proven to be fraudulent. The emails show premeditation and intent to deceive. She looked at my daughter and her husband with something close to disgust. You tried to steal from your own mother. You forged legal documents. You lied to financial institutions. You gaslit and manipulated an elderly woman who'd sacrificed to give you a home. I don't know what's more disturbing, the fraud itself, or the complete lack of remorse I'm seeing from both of you? My daughter was crying now. Quiet tears streaming down her face. But they weren't tears of regret. They were tears of someone who'd been caught. Someone who'd lost. The court rules in favor of Mrs. Dolroy, the judge continued. The property at 428 Oakwood Drive belongs to her, free and clear. Any claims made by Mr. and Mrs. Harrison are hereby dismissed. Furthermore, I'm referring this case to the District Attorney's Office for potential criminal charges related to fraud and forgery. The gavel came down. Sharp. Final. Definitive. It was over. I sat there in stunned silence, not quite believing it had actually happened. Mr. Alva was shaking my hand. Maribel was hugging me. People were gathering their things and filing out of the courtroom. My daughter walked past without looking at me. Her husband was on his phone already, probably calling someone to figure out what to do next. Their lawyer looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. Outside the courthouse, the sunlight felt too bright, too real. Like I'd been living in darkness for so long I'd forgotten what daylight looked like. You did it, Maribel said, squeezing my arm. Seraphine, you actually did it. We did it, I corrected. I couldn't have done any of this alone. Mr. Alva pulled out another folder. Now comes the next part. You have options. You can evict them immediately. You can negotiate a settlement. You can sell the house. It's entirely up to you. I looked at that folder, thinking about what was inside. Thinking about my daughter and her husband packing up their things, leaving the house I'd bought with 3 years of my life. Part of me felt vindicated. Victorious. Proven right. But another part, the part that was still a mother, that still remembered pushing a baby girl on a swing set, that still carried memories of bedtime stories and birthday cakes, that part just felt sad. I need some time to think, I said. Take all the time you need, Mr. Alva replied. But Seraphine, you should be proud of yourself. Not many people would have fought this hard. Not many people would have had the courage to stand up to their own family. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. That night, alone in my apartment, I pulled out an old photo album. Flipped through pictures of my daughter at every age. Baby. Toddler. Little girl. Teenager. Bride. Where had it all gone wrong? When had she stopped being that little girl who'd clung to my leg on her first day of kindergarten? When had I stopped being her mother and started being her enemy? I didn't have answers. Maybe I never would. But I knew one thing for certain now. I wasn't erased. I wasn't invisible. I wasn't nothing. I was Seraphine Dolroy, and I'd just won my life back. The hardest decision was still to come, what to do with the house. The judge's ruling should have felt like the end. Like closure. Like I could finally breathe again. But instead, I spent 3 days in my apartment just staring at walls, unable to decide what came next. Mr. Alva called every morning. Seraphine, we need to discuss next steps. The longer they stay in that house, the more complicated this gets. I knew he was right. But every time I thought about evicting my own daughter, about putting her and her husband out on the street, something inside me twisted up in knots. Maribel came over on the 4th day. Found me sitting in my wicker chair, still in my pajamas at 2 in the afternoon, staring out at nothing. Okay, she said, sitting down across from me. Talk to me. What's going on in that head of yours? I don't know what to do, I admitted. The house is mine. The court proved that. But they're still my daughter and son-in-law. How do I just throw them out? They didn't have any problem throwing you out. I know. But what does it say about me if I do the same thing to them? If I become just as cruel? Maribel was quiet for a moment. Then she leaned forward, her voice gentle but firm. Seraphine, protecting yourself isn't cruelty. Standing up for what's yours isn't cruelty. They didn't just kick you out. They assaulted you, forged documents, tried to steal your property, planned your erasure. This isn't about revenge. This is about justice. But she's still my daughter. Is she though? When did she last act like your daughter? When did she last treat you like her mother? The question hit harder than I expected. Because the truth was, I couldn't remember. Couldn't remember the last time she'd hugged me without it feeling obligatory. Couldn't remember the last time she'd asked how I was doing and actually listened to the answer. Couldn't remember when I'd stopped being a person to her and started being just an obstacle. You know what I think? Maribel continued. I think you're still trying to be the mother you always were. The one who sacrificed everything, who put her child first no matter what. But Seraphine, she's not that child anymore. And you can't keep setting yourself on fire to keep her warm. That image stuck with me. Setting myself on fire. That's exactly what I'd been doing for years, wasn't it? Burning myself down to nothing while my daughter stood nearby, warming her hands on the flames. Mr. Alva suggested a compromise that afternoon. A structured settlement. They'd have 60 days to find a new place and move out. In exchange, I wouldn't pursue criminal charges for the forgery and fraud. Wouldn't push the district attorney to prosecute. It's more than generous, he said. More than they deserve, honestly. But it gives them time to land on their feet and gives you a clean break. 60 days, I repeated. 2 months. Plenty of time for them to find an apartment, pack up, start over. I thought about it for a long time. 60 days felt both too long and not long enough. Too long to wait for this nightmare to finally end. Not long enough to somehow fix what was broken between us. But maybe broken things weren't meant to be fixed. Maybe sometimes you just had to accept the pieces and move on. Okay, I said finally. 60 days. The paperwork was drawn up and served to them within a week. My daughter called me afterward, her voice cold and flat. 60 days. That's all you're giving us. That's 2 months, I said. More time than you gave me when you decided I wasn't welcome anymore. We're going to fight this. You already fought. You lost. The judge ruled. The court has spoken. Now you have a choice. Take the 60 days and move on with your life, or keep fighting and risk criminal prosecution for fraud. Your call. She hung up without another word. But I knew they wouldn't fight anymore. They couldn't. They'd used up all their ammunition in court, and it had backfired spectacularly. Now they were just trying to save whatever dignity they had left. The next 4 weeks passed in a strange kind of limbo. I didn't hear from my daughter. Didn't see her. It was like she'd decided I simply didn't exist anymore, which, ironically, was exactly what she'd wanted me to feel all along. But I was feeling something different now. Something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. I started leaving my apartment more. Started going to church again. Started having coffee with Maribel and other friends I'd let drift away during the years of abuse and gaslighting. Started remembering who I was before I became nothing but my daughter's punching bag. One afternoon, I drove past the house on Oakwood Drive. Just drove by slowly, looking at it from the street. The roses I'd planted years ago were still there, though they looked neglected. The paint was peeling in places. The front lawn needed mowing. I didn't feel the attachment I expected to feel. Didn't feel that pull of home. Because that building had stopped being home the moment my daughter decided I didn't belong there. That's when I made my decision. I called Mr. Alva that evening. I want to sell it. The house. Yes. I don't want it anymore. Don't want the memories attached to it. Don't want to spend the next however many years being a landlord to someone else. I want to sell it and use the money to start over. Are you sure? You could rent it out. Could keep it as an investment. I'm sure. Can you recommend a good real estate agent? He could. He did. Within 3 days, I had an agent named Patricia who specialized in quick sales. She came to my apartment with comps and market analysis and staging suggestions. With the current market, we could list this for $450,000, she said. Maybe more. Good neighborhood, solid house, nice lot. $450,000. For something I'd bought for $90,000 back in 2009. The math was almost absurd. How fast can we sell it? I asked. If we price it right and market it well? 2 weeks. Maybe less. Let's do it. The listing went live on a Tuesday. By Thursday, we had 6 offers. By Saturday, we had 12. Patricia called me Sunday morning, her voice excited. Seraphine, we have a cash offer. Full asking price. Family with 3 kids. They need to move quickly for a job relocation. They want to close in 2 weeks. 2 weeks. Which meant my daughter and her husband would come home from work one day to find the house sold out from under them. Take it, I said. The paperwork moved fast after that. Inspections, appraisals, title searches. Everything they'd tried to fake years ago was now being done legitimately, properly, legally. And every signature confirmed the same truth. The house was mine to sell. I didn't tell my daughter. Didn't warn her it was coming. Just let the process move forward while she and her husband presumably packed up their things, thinking they had weeks left to figure out their next move. The closing was scheduled for a Wednesday afternoon. 2 days before their 60-day deadline would have expired. I met Patricia at the title company office. Signed stack after stack of papers. Watched numbers transfer on computer screens. Accepted a cashier's check that represented 3 years of my life plus 16 years of appreciation. Congratulations, Patricia said, shaking my hand. You're officially closed. I walked out of that office feeling lighter than I had in years. The house was sold. The money was in my account. The chapter was closed. My daughter called me an hour later, screaming, "What did you do? What did you do?" I sold the house, I said calmly. It was mine to sell. There are people here. With a moving truck. They're saying they own it now. They're telling us we need to leave. You had 60 days. You've had 58. Time to go. We're not ready. We haven't found a place yet. You can't just. I can. I did. You should have started looking sooner. I hate you. She screamed. I hate you so much. You've ruined our lives. You've destroyed everything we worked for. And there it was again. Everything they'd worked for. As if I hadn't existed. As if my 3 years of 2 jobs and sacrifice and saving had never happened. As if the house had just magically appeared for them to claim. Actions have consequences, I said quietly. I didn't erase you. You tried to erase me. This is just me writing my own ending. I hung up before she could respond. That night, I sat in my apartment with a cup of tea, thinking about everything that had happened. The slaps. The discovery. The investigation. The trial. The ruling. The sale. Did I feel guilty? A little. She was still my daughter, and some part of me would always love that little girl she used to be. But I also felt something stronger than guilt. Liberation. Her scream echoed through the phone when she realized everything was gone. The cashier's check sat on my kitchen table for 2 days before I could bring myself to deposit it. $450,000. It felt surreal. Like money that belonged to someone else. Like I'd somehow stumbled into a different person's life. But it was mine. All of it. Payment for 3 years of my life plus all those years of being told I didn't matter. Maribel came over the day after the sale closed. Found me still in my pajamas again, staring at that check like it might disappear if I looked away. "You okay?" she asked. "I don't know what I am," I admitted. "I sold my daughter's house while she was at work. What kind of mother does that?" The kind who was slapped 25 times and stolen from. The kind who stood up for herself. The kind who refused to be erased. But now what? I have all this money and nowhere to go and no family left and... Stop. Maribel sat down next to me, took my hands. "You have a choice now. Maybe for the first time in years, you actually get to choose what happens next. So what do you want, Seraphine? Not what you think you should want. Not what would make other people happy. What do you want?" I thought about it. Really thought about it. "I want peace," I said finally. "I want to wake up without that knot in my stomach. I want to go to bed without replaying everything in my head. I want to live somewhere that feels like mine, where nobody can tell me I don't belong. I want to feel like a person again instead of just a problem to be solved." "Then let's make that happen." We spent that afternoon looking at real estate listings online. Small houses, condos, cottages, places that could be just mine, where I could start over without ghosts in every room. I found it 3 days later. A tiny cottage near the lake, about 40 minutes outside the city. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a little kitchen with windows that looked out at the water. It needed work. The floors were scratched, the paint was dated, the garden was completely overgrown, but something about it felt right. "It's perfect," I told the realtor showing me around. "It's been on the market for 6 months," she admitted. "Most people want something more modern, more updated." "I like that it needs work," I said. "Means I can make it exactly what I want." I made an offer that day. Cash. 20% under asking. They accepted within 12 hours. 4 weeks later, I was moving into my cottage. Maribel and a few friends from church helped me carry boxes inside. I didn't have much. Most of my furniture had been left behind when I'd fled to that first apartment, but what I had was mine. That first night in the cottage, I sat on the back porch with a cup of tea, watching the sun set over the lake. The water was calm. The air smelled like pine trees and fresh grass. Somewhere nearby, I could hear crickets starting their evening song. For the first time in years, I felt safe. The weeks that followed were busy in the best way. I spent my days painting walls in colors I actually liked. Soft blues and warm grays instead of the stark whites my daughter had insisted on. I planted flowers in the front yard. Fixed the squeaky step on the porch. Hung curtains that let in just the right amount of light. I started going to a local coffee shop in the mornings. Started chatting with the owner, a woman named Rosa who'd moved here from Peru 30 years ago. Started making friends with the regulars who gathered there. Retired teachers, artists, a writer who was always working on his novel. I joined a book club at the library. Started volunteering at the community center, teaching basic computer skills to seniors who wanted to email their grandchildren. Started filling my days with things that mattered, with people who saw me as a person instead of a burden. And slowly, painfully, I started to heal. But healing isn't linear. Some days I'd wake up feeling strong and capable and proud of myself. Other days I'd wake up crying, grieving the daughter I'd lost, wondering if I could have done something differently. One morning, about 3 months after I'd moved into the cottage, I got a letter. No return address. My daughter's handwriting on the envelope. I almost threw it away without opening it. Almost burned it in the fireplace. Almost pretended it had never arrived. But curiosity won out. The letter was short. Just a few paragraphs written on lined notebook paper. Mom, I don't know if you'll even read this. I don't know if you care. But I need to say some things. We lost everything. The sale was so fast we couldn't find an apartment in time. We had to move in with Mark's parents. It's humiliating. Everyone knows what happened. Everyone knows we lost. I can't show my face in the old neighborhood. I can't go back to that grocery store or that coffee shop because people whisper when they see me. You destroyed our life. You took everything we had. And I know you're going to say we tried to take everything from you first, but that's different. That house was supposed to be ours eventually anyway. You were just holding onto it out of spite. You could have been generous. Could have just signed it over and avoided all this mess. Instead you made us look like criminals. Made us lose everything. I hope you're happy now. I hope it was worth it. You got your revenge. You won. Congratulations. But you lost a daughter in the process. Was it worth it? Was the money worth losing me forever? I read it 3 times. Each time, I felt different things. Anger, sadness, frustration. But mostly, I felt clarity. Because even now, even after everything that had happened, she still didn't get it. Still thought she was the victim. Still believed the house was supposed to be hers, as if my 3 years of work had been nothing but a formality. Still couldn't see how she tried to erase me, steal from me, gaslight me into thinking I was crazy. Even her apology, if you could call it that, was wrapped in blame. You destroyed our life. You took everything. You made us look like criminals. Not I'm sorry I slapped you. Not I'm sorry we forged documents. Not I'm sorry we tried to steal your house. Just more accusations. More rewriting of history to make herself the victim. I folded the letter carefully and put it in a drawer. Maybe someday I'd look at it again and feel something different. But right now, all I felt was tired. Tired of the fight. Tired of the drama. Tired of trying to make someone see me who'd decided years ago that I didn't matter. So I made a choice. The hardest choice I'd ever made. I chose to let her go. Not with anger. Not with bitterness. Just with acceptance. My daughter had become someone I didn't recognize. Someone who valued a house more than her mother. Someone who could justify assault and fraud and theft because she felt entitled to what I'd built. And I couldn't save her from that. Couldn't fix her. Couldn't make her understand what she'd done wrong. All I could do was save myself. That afternoon, I wrote my own letter. Short. Simple. Final. I forgive you. Not because you've earned it, but because I need to let this go. I forgive you for the slaps, for the lies, for trying to erase me. I forgive you so I can move forward without carrying this weight. But forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. It doesn't mean I'm willing to let you hurt me again. You made choices that destroyed our relationship. You chose a house over your mother. You chose lies over truth. Those were your choices, not mine. I hope someday you understand what you lost. But whether you do or not, I'm moving on. I'm living my life. I'm finding peace. And I'm doing it without you. I wish you well. But I wish you well from a distance. Goodbye. I mailed it that same day. Didn't overthink it. Didn't second guess myself. Just sent it and let it go. Would you have sold it, or given her another chance? Drop your answer in the comments below. 6 months after moving into the cottage, I woke up to the sound of birds singing outside my window. Not the refrigerator hum. Not the distant highway. Just birds. Welcoming another morning. I made coffee and sat on my back porch, watching the lake ripple in the early morning breeze. The garden I'd planted was starting to bloom: roses, daisies, lavender. The rocking chair I'd bought at a yard sale creaked gently as I moved back and forth. This was peace. This was home. This was what life felt like when you weren't constantly bracing for the next attack. Do I still think about my daughter? Every day. Some days more than others. Some days I'll see a mother and daughter shopping together and feel that familiar ache in my chest. Some days I'll remember her as a little girl and wonder where that child went. But I've learned something important over these past months. Grief and peace can exist in the same space. You can mourn what you lost while still celebrating what you found. I found myself. That's what this whole nightmare gave me. I found the woman who'd been buried under years of abuse and gaslighting. The woman who'd worked 2 jobs and saved every penny. The woman who knew her worth even when everyone around her said she was worthless. The money from the house sale changed my life in practical ways. I paid off every debt I had. Set up a retirement account that would actually let me retire someday. Bought this cottage and fixed it up exactly how I wanted it. Put some aside for emergencies, for medical bills, for whatever the future might hold. But the real treasure wasn't the money. It was the lesson buried underneath all that pain. Silence isn't weakness. That's what I learned. All those months I spent quietly gathering evidence, organizing documents, building my case. That wasn't cowardice. That was strategy. That was strength wrapped in patience. Paper trails matter. Everything leaves a mark. Every email, every text, every forged signature, every lie told to a neighbor, all of it creates a trail that leads back to the truth. My daughter thought she was being clever, but she was really just building the case against herself, one careless word at a time. Allies matter. I couldn't have done this alone. Maribel, Mr. Alva, Chun the investigator, even Rosa at the coffee shop who listened to me cry some mornings. They all held me up when I couldn't hold myself. Nobody wins these battles alone. Nobody. And maybe most importantly, you are not erased until you allow it. My daughter tried to write me out of the story. Tried to make me disappear. Tried to convince everyone, including me, that I didn't matter. But I refused to accept that narrative. I found my voice. I gathered my evidence. I stood in that courtroom and said, no, this is my story, and I'm the one who gets to tell it. The cottage has become more than just a place to live. It's become a symbol of everything I survived and everything I built from the ashes. Friends come over now. We have dinners on the porch overlooking the lake. We drink wine and tell stories and laugh until our sides hurt. I started writing too. Nothing fancy, just a journal where I process everything that happened. Some days I write about the pain. Other days I write about the victory. But every entry ends the same way: I am still here. I still matter. I survived. Last month, I got a call from someone I didn't expect. My grandson. He's 16 now, old enough to have his own phone, old enough to reach out without his mother knowing. Grandma. His voice was uncertain. Nervous. It's Tyler. My heart almost stopped. Tyler. Hi, sweetheart. I heard what happened. Some of it anyway. Mom won't talk about it, but I heard her fighting with Dad. And I looked up some stuff online. Court records and things. I waited, not sure where this was going. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. For how they treated you. For not standing up for you when I should have. I was scared. And I didn't really understand what was happening. But I understand now. And I'm sorry. Tears were streaming down my face. Thank you. That means more than you know. Can I come visit you sometime? Mom doesn't have to know. I thought about it. About the complications. About my daughter's reaction if she found out. About whether I was willing to risk opening that door again. But then I thought about that little boy who used to call me just Grandma instead of Grandma Seraphine. The one who'd run to me when he scraped his knee. The one who'd beg me to read him one more story before bed. Yes, I said. You can visit any time you want. We're planning it for next month. He'll take the bus here after school one Friday. Stay the weekend. We'll fish in the lake and make pancakes, and maybe I'll finally teach him how to plant roses like I always promised. Will it complicate things? Probably. Will my daughter be furious when she finds out? Almost certainly. But I'm done letting fear dictate my choices. I'm done being erased. Tyler deserves to know his grandmother. And I deserve to know my grandson. Whatever consequences come from that, we'll face them together. People ask me sometimes if I regret how things turned out. If I wish I'd handled it differently. If I feel guilty about what happened to my daughter. The truth is complicated. Yes, I wish things were different. I wish my daughter was the person I'd raised her to be. I wish we could have the relationship we once had. I wish she'd never raised her hand against me, never forged those documents, never tried to steal what I'd built. But I don't regret standing up for myself. I don't regret fighting back. I don't regret selling that house and using the money to build a new life. Because the alternative, letting her erase me, accepting their version of reality, fading into nothing, that would have killed me. Maybe not physically, but in every way that actually matters. It would have killed my spirit, my sense of self, my belief that I deserved to exist. And I wasn't willing to die like that. Not even for my daughter. So I chose myself. Maybe for the first time in my life, I put myself first. And yes, it cost me. It cost me a relationship with my daughter. It cost me the fantasy of a happy family. It cost me the comfortable lie that everything would work out if I just kept being patient and understanding and self-sacrificing. But what I gained was worth more than all of that. I gained my dignity, my peace, my voice, my home, my life. I'm 62 years old now. I have gray hair and laugh lines and hands that are starting to ache when it rains. I'm not rich. I'm not famous. I'm not anyone special by the world's standards. But I'm here. I'm alive. I matter. And nobody, not my daughter, not her husband, not anyone, can take that away from me again. To anyone listening who's been overlooked, cast aside, or treated like they don't exist, I want you to hear this. You matter. Your story matters. Your pain is real. Your anger is justified. Your desire for justice isn't selfish. And you have more power than you think. Power in patience. Power in documentation. Power in finding the right allies. Power in refusing to accept someone else's narrative about who you are. They can try to erase you. They can rewrite history. They can gaslight you into doubting your own memories. But they can't actually make you disappear unless you let them. So don't let them. Stand up. Speak out. Gather your evidence. Build your case. Find your people. And when the moment comes, and it will come, tell your truth with every ounce of strength you have. My daughter once thought she had the power to write me out of my own story. She thought she could take what I'd built and claim it as her own. She thought she could slap me 25 times and I'd just accept it. Just disappear. Just cease to matter. But in the end, I wrote the final chapter. Not with violence. Not with cruelty. Not with revenge. But with patience, evidence, and the kind of quiet justice that waits for exactly the right moment to breathe. I wrote it with dignity. With truth. With the simple, undeniable power of paper trails and people who refused to let me be erased. And I wrote it with quiet ink. The kind that doesn't shout or scream or make a scene. The kind that just tells the truth and lets the truth do what truth always does, wins in the end. So that's my story. That's how I went from being slapped 25 times by my own daughter to standing in my own cottage, drinking my own coffee, living my own life on my own terms. It wasn't easy. It wasn't quick. And it definitely wasn't painless. But it was worth it. Every single moment of it was worth it. Because I'm still here. And I still matter. And nobody can ever take that away from me again. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt erased or overlooked or told you don't matter, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below sharing your thoughts. Your story might inspire someone else who's going through the same thing. Your voice might be exactly what someone needs to hear to find their own courage. And please, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We have more stories coming. Stories of people who refused to be victims, who stood up against impossible odds, who found justice in the quietest, most powerful ways. Stories that prove you're never as powerless as they want you to believe. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Someone who's struggling. Someone who's been told they don't matter. Someone who needs a reminder that quiet strength is still strength. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being part of this family. Thank you for believing that justice, real justice, is possible. Now go out there and write your own final chapter. Whatever that looks like for you. Whatever justice means in your situation. Whatever standing up for yourself requires. Do it with quiet ink. Do it with patience. Do it with evidence and allies and unshakable belief in your own worth. And when it's done, when you've won, when you're standing in your own version of this cottage looking at your own version of this lake, remember where you started. Remember what you survived. Remember that you refused to be erased. Because that's the real victory. Not the money. Not the house. Not even the court ruling. The real victory is knowing that you fought for yourself when nobody else would. That you believed in your own story when everyone else was trying to rewrite it. That's what matters. That's what lasts. That's what nobody can ever take away. Subscribe now so you don't miss our next story. Turn on those notifications. Drop your comments below. Let's build a community of people who refuse to be erased. Who stand up. Who speak out. Who write their own endings with quiet, powerful, undeniable ink. Until next time, remember, you matter. Your story matters. And you're stronger than anyone who's tried to silence you ever gave you credit for. This is Seraphine Dolroy, and this was my story of quiet justice.